Welcome to another OCD Recovery Instagram Live. I thought I would get one of these done first thing of the day. So I'm going to be talking a little bit today about gratitude and in relation to the past, how OCD was in the past for people. Now, this is something that's not always covered. It's something that doesn't always get a lot of attention. It's something that a lot of people we don't have so many records of it, and we don't know about it as much. It's not huge, great deal written about it. So a lot of it we can presume, but we can go on facts too from history. So what I'm going to talk about is OCD in the past and how absolutely lucky we are to be in this time period with OCD rather than being in time period of the past. In the past, if you think that, let's say, when it's only in the last couple of decades that OCD recovery is anywhere within reach, okay? In the last couple of decades, when you think of the span of time, how long human beings have been around, that's a very, very short time frame. If we look at the likes of Howard Hughes, one of the richest men in the world at the time, and Martin Scorsese made the film about him with Leonardo DiCaprio, The Aviator. When we look at his life, and he had all the money, all the medical staff, everyone around him to be able to. The facilities he had, you would think, oh my God, he's got such amazing facilities around him, all different therapists and so on. You would have thought he would have been able to have a much better quality of life, but he wasn't. He wasn't able to, because at his time there did not exist the knowledge for OCD treatment. Now, in the last 20 to 30 years, thanks to the likes of Aaron Beck and Albert Ellis forming CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, this changed things a lot. But this is still, although they formed that, and that was built on the knowledge from predominantly so much of Stoicism from the Greeks and Roman philosophers that built so much of the foundations of REBT, rational emotive behavior therapy, created by Albert Ellis, that went on to become cognitive behavior therapy. Although we have so much knowledge in books and so on in front of us, we are still on the cusp of people understanding that and finding that, and hence what I do every day is getting to people, teaching them, changing their mindsets on OCD, and putting together tools on how to make that journey easier. We're in relation to so many things that we're learning in the last decade, in relation to anxiety, things that have been around through Buddhism and so on, and mindfulness, but it's becoming a lot more applied to OCD now. So we live in a great time to have all of this really coming forward now, with people understanding about their OCD, people sharing their stories about recovery, people speaking to one another and seeing things. That's why I run the group format, so people can see, I've got harm OCD, I've got POCD, I've got such and such relation to false memory to this, and they're like, oh my God, that person's got the same as me. Now, that would have never happened in the past. In the past, this was a very, very different situation. If you'd had OCD in the past, what would have happened is it was very, very likely that you would have told any friends and family, if you did tell them, which you probably wouldn't have, but if you did, you could easily have been told that you were a witch. You could have been told that you have a devil in you. People could have burnt people alive because of what they confessed to. People would have, mainly a lot of it would have been around blasphemy-related OCD, constantly going to confession and confessing for things that they didn't do hundreds of times a day to be allowed into heaven and not to go to hell because of how society was at that time. So there would have been a huge amount of blasphemy OCD. And in relation to people going to mental hospitals, so many people would have been left in mental asylums for the majority of their life, unable to function. Functioning with OCD, well, no one would have ever met anyone else with OCD because there was no social media or internet. So that wouldn't have happened. So I often think with the groups, if only I could just think of the millions of people in the past, that if they could just attend one of the group calls for 5 minutes and just hear, oh my God, that person's got exactly the same as me, and that I'm not alone, I'm not the only one. That never would have been a possibility. They would have never met anyone that would have had the same as them, unless just randomly somebody had come round to someone's house, someone had cried at one point, confided in their friend, and they happened to the other person to say, that's what I've got, that's what I'm going through. And then that link will have been made, which I'm sure was made on a few occasions, or certain therapists or doctors noticed a combination of these things, that would have happened. And it's not like they didn't know what OCD was. They did know about OCD and people with these kind of things. But in terms of group formats and things like that, I don't know how that operated. And if it did operate, then it definitely wouldn't have led to recovery, because we know what was achievable in terms of recovery only in the last 10, 20, 30 years. So if we go back then, that wouldn't have been the case. If you're looking at the likes of Howard Hughes with all of those facilities in only about 50, 60 or so years ago, then how on earth would that have ever happened in the Middle Ages, the Egyptian times, or so on? Now, yes, the knowledge has been there in terms of in Stoicism, Greek and Roman philosophy, likes of Marcus Aurelius, Seneca the Younger, Epictetus, Diogenes, all these different people that practiced, who were philosophers at the time, would have had a great understanding, and that kind of knowledge would have been very helpful for OCD. But unless they understood how to apply it, exposure therapy didn't come around till much later, thousands of years later. It would have been very, very difficult to get in there. So you're looking at some really, really horrendous times in the past. Pretty much anyone with OCD wouldn't have met anyone with OCD. Their chances of ever getting any treatment was pretty much zero, and if they did get any treatment, the chance of it working was pretty much zero. So if you just think of all those lives where someone would have spent on one thought for 40 years not being able to move forward, and because of their society beliefs, and it centered so much around religion, such common ones would have been I'm possessed by a devil, and you can imagine how that got treated by society or anyone they told. So they would have been convinced of that and spent their whole life living like that. And you're talking, the numbers would be absolutely colossal, because if we think of even today how many people have OCD, but it's something that people think, oh, it's only a very small niche of people in the world that have OCD, when it's not like that at all. I used to think that for quite a long time, initially when I first got diagnosed with OCD, but then meeting more and more people over the years, you see, oh my God, there's so many people with OCD, but also meeting people in social life that had OCD, that I used to think, God, this must be rare to have, and then bumping into those people in normal day-to-day life before I started working with OCD, and that is hugely common. It makes you realize how common it is. I've been on different dates in the past where I'd met 2 or 3 people over the years that had severe OCD just by chance. And so I saw, this isn't just me thinking like that. But however, one of the first dates that I had with someone with severe OCD, I didn't know I had OCD. So I believed what she was saying, because she said, I'm very scared for you to come around to my house, because at the moment I've got this thing where I can't be around knives. And I was thinking, that's very strange. That does sound a bit dangerous. Don't want to be going to her house. And that's because at the time I had no idea that what OCD was or how it operated. I understood my thing, but my thing was kind of separate. I was relating to a false memory in the past from about 8 years ago. So to me, that wasn't OCD. To me, that was real. So that was a really different thing that I was seeing, and I didn't have a knowledge of OCD then. So in terms of looking at today, where we're at this incredible time period right now, where we have at our facilities the ability to talk to other people with OCD, see we're not alone. We've got the tools to get better, to a position where we won't be able to tell the difference if we have OCD or not, where we can live our lives fully. Yes, it will still be there. Yes, we will still get caught on it now and again, but 99% of the time, you won't notice it. You won't be able to tell the difference between having it or not. It will only creep in and try and trigger intermittently, but a huge amount reduction, where your intrusive thoughts will be very limited because the brain won't send them out because it will know that you don't care about them. That's the sort of end goal for recovery, which I talk constantly about. I get intrusive thoughts, but not very intrusive, and quite rare, because my brain knows, well, he doesn't care about that, so there's no need to send that out. So that's the sort of where I try and take people to with OCD recovery. And even along that journey, whilst they're going along, getting life back to as functioning better and better, as better than before. Huge changes in lifestyle and structure. People, that's the main thing I'm focusing on: getting people out living their life. Even if they've got OCD and it's pestering them, they're still living and traveling, doing everything they want to do. That's one of the first parts of the goals that I'm on with them, to get them better. So what you're looking at is a situation where right now we are living at a time which is absolutely incredible to have OCD in compared to any other time. However, I do not doubt for a second that 100 to 200 years from now, if we are still all alive, not as in me, but as in us, as in the human species, if we are still alive, what will OCD treatment be like then? I can only imagine that at that point they will have narrowed it down to what's in the brain in either a tablet form, laser form, or some genetic CRISPR DNA splicing situation to change how OCD is dealt with. I have no doubt in that time frame, at the speed it's moving now, although it still feels like we're in the dark ages a lot of the time, it's moving very, very fast. So with it moving like that, I think we're going to see massive changes, and people will look back at even this time period as that was just, okay, people were getting better then, but still sort of on the brink of how we view the Middle Ages. I imagine in the future we'll look like that in anything that we do in life. They'll think, oh my God, how did they used to go around? And this is not relation to health OCD, this is relation to the future. I think they'll most likely go around saying, how did humans used to go around not knowing what their blood pressure was, or not knowing how their arteries were 100% of the time, due to little bots that are going around our blood vessels testing how healthy we are, and what risks of cancer we have, and what DNA changes we have long time before they happen. If you look at now how we're testing things like, for example, with skin cancer that we weren't doing before, and then being able to check that before, or all different types of cancer, especially form of prostate cancer. The reason there's so many prostate cancer diagnosis today is because that they can test it so early on, it makes you think with OCD what kind of genetic tests they will do, what kind of treatments they will do, how it will be. I have no doubt they'll think, God, they had to do a lot of work to get better then, where it'll be very different now. However, if that's the trade-off of not learning to change your perception of life, your philosophies, and adapting how you view and interact in your life, and you only take a pill, I'm pretty glad I went through what I did, because I wouldn't have this experience and perception of life. I certainly wouldn't see it like this. So that's a really important thing to remember. However, I think you really, what I'm talking about here today is to take gratitude from this situation, looking back at how bloody lucky we are to be at this point right now. Such a small window. Any of those people would have died. All those people that have died before us, which you're talking vast numbers of people that would, if you spoke to them for a flicker, for a minute of their life, of what it was like in 1500, 14, 13, 12, 11, whatever, and you said to them, what was it like living with OCD? They'll say, well, I was just convinced all day long of this thing for my whole life. There would be no difference. So I think that's something that we want to remember always. I always think about that in terms of a position of gratitude. Now let me have a look at some of these questions in here quickly. How did you learn that your false memories were false and not real? Mine feel very real. Well, I didn't do it like that. You're not going to do it by trying to work out if your memories were false or real. I did it by learning and practicing unconditional self-acceptance, one of the key principles taught by the founder of CBT, Albert Ellis. I worked and practiced until I truly embodied that, till I felt it and deeply believed it, so I could see it and I could see the irrational thinking, the nonsense that we tell ourselves is false, so that I could see that even in the case of my false memory being true, that I could still accept myself. That wouldn't be my life over. When I did that, it changed things, because I realized then and there that even if it was, I could still be at peace. I could see that. It made complete sense to me. And when I did that, I knew I didn't have to chase to work it out anymore, because I could be at peace either way. Then once I got relief and I had fully accepted the worst case scenario, which you don't have to do fully to get OCD relief, but for me, that's what got right under it. Sometimes you have to do it, sometimes you don't, depending on how it's affecting you. And when I got under it fully, I really got in there. Then it suddenly unlatched OCD, and then I was like, well, it's not even false. It is false. I can see that now. But it doesn't prove that and demonstrate that to you until you have given up, till you have really internally surrendered that fight that happens when you've completely made peace with it. So that's what happened for me. It's when you get to a position of acceptance, suddenly it unhooks. So it's like when you make peace with one of your fears, then it dives and morphs to another fear. It does that. That's the nature of it. That's what it does. And so then when you've done that, then you see it for what it is. You might have done that with current fears that you already have. You'll be thinking, God, I don't even care about that old fear. How did I bother about that? It's because OCD's unlatched. Let's have a look here. Could you please speak a bit about the unconditional self-acceptance theory? Thanks again for your help, Rob. Unconditional self-acceptance. The best place to read and watch about it is to go on YouTube, type in Albert Ellis, the founder of CBT, and then unconditional self-acceptance. So don't type in founder of CBT, just type in Albert Ellis, unconditional self-acceptance, and you will see many videos talking about this. And the best book to start with on my reading list is How to Stubbornly Refuse to Make Yourself Miserable About Anything by Albert Ellis. Read that. That will help you to understand unconditional self-acceptance. And a second book that puts it, for me, really helped lay the foundations for that was The Myth of Self-Esteem. The Myth of Self-Esteem by Albert Ellis really helps that, especially chapter 4, Psychotherapy and the Value of a Human. Great chapter, really going into detail about how that is the case. Okay, let's have a look. Any other questions? Yeah, I thought as a habit, I'm going to start doing these Instagram lives when I get straight out of the shower, right before I go for a workout or anything, just so that I get into a habit of doing it. So I'm going to try and keep these coming to you. Let's have a look. Do you think creating a hierarchy of fears is good, or do you think it's adding truth to your obsessive thoughts? A hierarchy of fears is a very good thing. There's nothing wrong with a hierarchy of fears, but don't get too fanatical about how many things are on there and which position. Let's just do it with, I'd always apply a very simplistic method to OCD recovery, not trying to make things overcomplicated, because that's what OCD wants us to do, make everything extremely complicated all the time. And we don't want to be doing that. We want to keep it simplistic. So try and keep it simplistic. Good hierarchy is good, but we don't want to have bundles of notes, hundreds of pages of notes for sessions. It gets too complex. It becomes a nightmare. I try and keep things simple with everyone that I work with for that reason. Unconditional self-acceptance, you can definitely find stuff on YouTube about that. Really spend time on YouTube watching the old Albert Ellis videos. There's so many on there talking about the principles of understanding rational thinking, which will get under so much of your problems and is not extensively covered in CBT. Unfortunately, if you ask the average CBT therapist who even created their profession, who founded it, and like if you ask a physicist who's some of the big people behind your profession, they'll say, oh, like Einstein. They'll know who Einstein is. They will know who Einstein is. They'll know who Isaac Newton is. They will know that. If you ask most CBT therapists, do you know who Albert Ellis is? I would probably go with the suggestion that 90% don't. Now, that's not because they've done their career wrong. They've just been taught what they've been taught, but they haven't followed it. Unfortunately, the way it has been taught is they haven't followed how it was built, the main concepts, taking it back to the rational thinking, which was the foundations of it. That is the most important bloody thing. Understanding the difference between rational and irrational thinking. One produces a chronic anxious response. One produces a calm, non-anxious response. It's all there. It's there, it's been laid out. And it's not rocket science that was suddenly invented by Beck and Ellis. Yes, the way they crafted it, Ellis, genius. Beck, genius how they've done it. But it wasn't crafted from nothing. It'd been there since Greek and Roman philosophy, laid out by the likes of Aurelius, Socrates, Epictetus, Seneca the Younger, all the great philosophers of that time. They had laid this out. This has been there for thousands of years. But like so much in life, when there's so many great things written out already, but we don't follow them. We go off on a tangent. We need to take it back and look at what was there. You can change your life from the Greek and Roman philosophy and the books written by Ellis, the founding principles of what created CBT. It is there. It takes practice and application over and over again to understand it and to really believe it and make the brain believe it by behavior work, by exposures, doing that repeatedly till it changes the way you think, but gets the brain to learn that new way to think. The brain needs to feel that way. When that all comes into play, comes into a process, comes into the way of being and how you're living, then things change. And that is what is crucial. So a great place to start is to get onto YouTube, watch the videos, read the books on my reading list. If you need me to post it again, let me know. There's a lot of great books on there. Another absolutely incredible book, and not to be missed out the list, is Claire Weeks, one of the true pioneers of the anxiety world. An incredible woman who, in her book, Self-Help for Your Nerves, laid out what has sort of paved the way for anxiety sufferers worldwide in any forum. Not that I advise going into forums because of sort of negativity spiraling cycles that happen in there. Claire Weeks has been talked about for decades. She lays out so much about anxiety, so much about OCD, so much in that book about learning how you're feeling, physical symptoms, how you're not broken, how not all hope is lost, that all it is sensitized nerves. And that is so crucial. So many people have physical anxiety symptoms, and they don't feel that anxious, and they think, fuck, I am broken, my nerves are destroyed, or something's wrong with my brain's firing wrong. No. The nerves need time to settle down. They haven't had that time because they've been constantly fueled by the irrational fears and different fears that are in there, constantly going over and over and over and over and over. It's the same as if you've got a broken leg and you started training your legs in the gym hard every day. Your leg's never going to heal. And that's the same thing. So Claire Weeks lays out so much of that in her book, and it's an incredible book. And you can watch videos by Claire Weeks, who I think is an amazing speaker, the same as Ellis, in terms of how they speak. Really good to the point of coming from a compassionate but tough, reasonably tough love approach necessary for OCD and anxiety disorders. And I think incredible stuff to watch. What is my reading list? Well, first book is How to Stubbornly Refuse to Make Yourself Miserable About Anything, I Mean Anything. That is the first book by the founder of CBT, Albert Ellis. Second book is The Myth of Self-Esteem by Albert Ellis. The third book is Claire Weeks' Self-Help for Your Nerves. The fourth book is Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. He was an Austrian psychiatrist, inventor of logotherapy, who was an Auschwitz Holocaust survivor, lost his family in there, talking about his own survival and hope and getting meaning from times where you would imagine all hope is lost. An incredible pioneer in suicide prevention. His book, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, is another, and there's quite a few other books on my list. If you scroll down my page, you'll see the reading list, or you can message me for details. All right, guys, thanks a lot. See you later. Take it easy.